Hi, we're going to be painting this image today. Excuse me as I sit down here. I have a styrofoam plate with my paint on it for my background. I have a piece of watercolor paper taped to just a piece of cardboard so I can move it around easily and it doesn't warp. And I put my image here so I can reference it. Cup of clean water, and I also have a rag here to dry off my brushes, tape that I use to tape down my piece of paper, and here are the brushes that I plan on using today, although I should probably go grab some bigger ones because now I have a bigger piece of paper. When I was doing the 5x7, so basically half of this, I use these guys. I'm going to go grab a larger piece so I can do the background quicker for you. Give me just a second. The background, for the ground, I just used the brown and the green mixed together with a little bit of the gray to kind of make it look kind of moody and, you know, fall-ish. And the sky up here is going to be all of these colors. I have a gray, a blue, and a purple with white. Do not mix them together. Keep them separate, so that you can just mix a little bit at a time, because if I was to mix all this, it'd be way too dark. I need to add a lot more white, a lot more white, a lot more white to get it the color I want. So I just have them there next to each other so I can grab from them. Alright, so I have a 1-inch flat brush here that I'll be doing the background with. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to dip my paintbrush in those colors and pick up a lot of white. So you can no longer see the colors on my paintbrush. I'm going to turn my paper canvas here so I can paint in the direction I need to paint at. And just go back and forth. I'm going to dip into the darks again and grab some more white. I'm going to go off my canvas. If you're painting on a canvas, I want you to paint the edges while you're painting the sides. It ends up looking a lot more finished. As I'm painting, I do not go over a lot. I don't keep going back and forth over one spot. I blend it in until I'm happy, and then I move on. I like having the look of all of those colors going on in there. I like it kind of when it's marbleized. Make sure I get all the way to my edges. And just run my brush down, get all the excess off of there. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back up in here. I'm going to redip in my color and in my white. And I'm just going to make some X's. This is going to make it look like it's moving. The clouds or whatever is doing some movement up here without actually having to paint in clouds. It's going to look like we have some clouds cascading or kind of floating away a little bit there. So X's, X marks the spot, or infinity symbols. I kind of do a swoosh like that, so it kind of creates an infinity symbol. If you want a couple wispy clouds in there, you can throw a couple smaller strokes in with just some white and make it look like there's clouds in the sky. And then I'm just going to kind of blend that together. Again, running the excess paint off my paintbrush down here at the end. I'm not really going to clean my paintbrush. I'm going to dip into the brown and the green. Mix it up a little bit over here on the paper. Sorry, on my palette, on my plate. If you want to add a little gray to it to make it a little moody, like a gray tone day, you can do that. You don't have to. You're painting, you choose the colors. This time I'm going to take it and I'm just going to paint up and down with it. Because in my mind, grass grows up and down and the sky goes back and forth. It's my story and I'm sticking to it. I'm going to pick up more paint. Make sure I have enough. I'm going to let it be wispy here at the end. As you see, it's kind of going into the grass. It makes it look uneven, like there's maybe a need to mow the grass. And that's the end. That's the whole background. It's completely covered. I've got plenty of paint on there. I don't see my paper, or in your case a canvas possibly, through my paint. If you still see that, you might want to do a second coat. I'm going to hit this, well, I'm just going to move it for like this for a while to get once the shininess goes away, my paper is dry, the paint is dry. So I always buy matte paints, it just helps that way for my beginners. So I'm just going to, off camera, just fan it like I'm, using a paper fan and fanning something, just to try to speed up the drying process. If you have a hair dryer or a second plate, I have another plate here, you can take it and do this to help speed up the drying process as well. It's a good arm workout. Get those chicken arms going. So have some fun with it, whichever way you want to do it. If you have the time, you can just let it set and come back to it later. Maybe you're a busy mom and you've got kids at home and you paint during nap time, or you paint during when they're playing, and when you hear nothing, then you get worried and you go check on them. So whatever time you have available, my painting here is going to fall on it, you can squeeze it in. So start with your background, get your background painted. And then I'm just fanning it dry so I can speed up the process. I do have a hair dryer, but I'd have to get up and go get it, and it's going to take time, and I don't want to stop the video. So we're going to call that dry. Again, a reference image. We did the background all one direction first, and I came in with the cross hatching to make it look like it's kind of wispy clouds going on up there. This is kind of sky still down here. And then I did the grass part here. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to draw in our man and our pumpkin. And we're going to do that in white. 1, so that it covers up the cover there. And 2, so the colors are a little bit more brilliant. But while I'm doing this, I'll show you the steps that you have to take to make those shapes, to make that gnome and all of his parts. And I'll explain it based on shapes, so it's fairly easy for you. Alright, whenever I'm painting gnomes and I know where it's going to be, like in my mind I see I want the gnome over here on this side and the pumpkin here. If I wanted to reverse that, put the gnome here, pumpkin there, or if I wanted a pumpkin in the middle and the gnome sitting on top of that, I want to plan that out first. I want to know where approximately on the page my gnome is going to be and my pumpkin, or my subject matter. It doesn't have to be a gnome and a pumpkin. Okay, you can make one giant pumpkin on here and call it done if you want. So I usually, so that I don't screw things up, I'm going to start with my gnome, because I can run my pumpkin off the page if I want, or I can run my gnome off the page if I want. I'm trying to get them both on the same page. Now my gnome, I'm going to start with his nose. I always like to start with his nose because to me that tells me where he's going to be on the page. So once I put my little oval shape here, okay, now I know that's where my gnome is going to be. And he's going to come over here with his arm a little bit, so he'll be about to here. I know that I can put my pumpkin in down here, because his legs are going to come below. So if I get the pumpkin over here on this side, I know that the gnome will fit over here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the next part of the gnome, and that's his hat. I'm going to take my paintbrush. It's just a flat one. If you want to use a round brush, or if that's all you have, you can use a round brush. I'm going to go ahead and load my brush. As I load, I twist so that it kind of keeps the bristles nice and round. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to make a nice line up over his nose, kind of like an upside down U. And that's going to be the brim of his hat. Now, I don't particularly like working with round brushes, so I'm going to stick with my flat one, just show you. You can either do a nice broad brim and do the whole size of your brush. Nice and slow. Try to start and stop similar distance so his hat's not on crooked. If it is, it's not a big deal. If you lose your nose and you can't tell where the nose and where the hat is, it's okay because we'll fix that later. If you think you want him to be a little bit wider, you can bring his hat out this way a little bit. So you can be a little bit bigger to fit on your page. Kind of give him like, if I was making a stick figure, this would be a girl in her hair. You know, here's a stick figure. I'll draw it on there just because I can, you know. And then you have anyway, that'll get covered up. Alright. I'm going to go ahead with the rest of his hat. So I'm going to come just about where that curve started. I'm just going to bring my point up this way. And I'll get over here. And I'm going to go up this way. So I'm kind of making a triangle. I can fill that triangle in. And it doesn't have to have straight lines. So if you're a little wobbly with your lines, your arms get a little wonky like that, well then accentuate that. Let that be part of your painting, let that be part of your style. It's okay. Yours does not need to look like mine. I'm showing you some techniques to help you make better paintings. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want his hat to come up a little bit more, but I want it to come over here and come down over this way. So I'm going to take this side, and I'm going to start going in this direction, and then I'm going to bring it down this way. Alright. And now from this side, I'm going to make it gets skinnier as it gets towards the top of his hat. Like a cone on his head. And you notice here, I turn my brush this way, little pressure, and finish that off. If I have a lot of pressure, it's going to widen out my bristles, spread them out, and I'm not going to have a nice fine line. So anytime I try to do an edge, I will turn my brush this way rather than painting it flat. I turn it to the side and give myself a nice line there. Alright, so that's my hat, and I'm going to put a little bell down here who's got to have a little tassel. And so it's kind of like putting a nose on it again. Alright, now from this point, I need to put his body. So we're going to pretend his body is about, you know, this big old thing like that. That's going to be his body. And his beard. So I'm going to color that all in. And fill it in, fill it in, fill it in. You can switch to a bigger brush if you want. You can stick with the smaller one. Whatever you feel comfortable with. Alright, I try not to leave a lot of excess paint. I'm just putting the white down to help cover up those darker colors and just show you where the gnome is going to be and the shapes that it takes to make a gnome. So we had an oval, and then we have an oblong oval going up and down, and we have the triangle, and you just kind of, you know, bend it. You don't have to bend it, you just leave a triangle pointy hat if you want to. Alright, so this is his belly. He's going to need arms, so we're going to bring his arms down. Okay, his shoulder and his arm, so I'm going to do the width of the paintbrush. In my case, it's a 1/4 inch. If you draw a larger painting, you might need a bigger one. I'm going to bring it out here again and bring it down. Blending in those lines just so I don't have an excess of paint there. I might make him a little fatter over here. kind of tweaking my lines a little bit as I go. I'm going to put his glove on. So there's the line for his cuff, for his gloves. And then I'm going to show you over here on this one because I can get my hand out of the way. I'm going to bring it down for his thumb. And then I'm going to come down again and bring that up for his hand. Now he's got ginormous hands, or he has ginormous gloves. Whichever way it looks doesn't matter to me. So we might have to make his arm a little wider so it fits in there. Same thing here. Then I'm going to do the outside of the glove first. There's the outside of the glove. And then his thumb. His thumbs are going to be pointing in. You want them to be about the same length again. They don't have to be perfect because, you know, it's not 100% perfect. We'll be filling in his beard through here. And I'm going to have his arm come this way a little bit. I might even make a little bit more belly here for him, so there's not so much space between his arms here and his belly. You don't need him standing out so far. Alright. Then his legs. His legs are going to attach to his body, so we're going to put like a little backwards parentheses off of his sides. So it's going to continue. Here's a circle, continue like really skinny S. Right? And then they're just going to go straight down from there. So straight down from there for his legs. I'm going to go ahead and give him the bottom of his leg. And the other one, he wants to be about the same length. We don't want to have a gnome that's kind of limping one-legged or two-legged or hopping along. Maybe, I mean, if you want to make a gnome with a missing leg, that's perfectly fine. This guy's got two. I'm going to finish coloring in his belly. And the top of his legs. Okay, so that's his basic shape. And I also have to put his boots on. So his boot is just kind of a circle, another ovalish, flat on the bottom, and round it up towards the top. And it's going to come here and it's going to continue with this pant leg and over. We're calling that the boot. The other one's going to face in the other direction. So he's going to come down, that's his heel, and it's going to come over and up. Again, we try to make them similar in size. Don't stress if they're not perfect. As you can see, mine are not perfect. I'm not stressing about it. Alright, let's take a look at our picture reference. You see this paper, obviously a lot smaller, so I made my gnome larger. But generally, he's pretty close to where he was. He was probably over this way a little bit more in this picture. And I'll do a pumpkin here. I can put another couple pumpkins back there or something else if I feel that I need to fill the space a little bit more later. I can add more than what I have here in the original picture. And I would hope you would do the same. Just kind of add to your painting what you want on your painting. So typically I don't feel like gnomes are this tall, right? I feel like they're little dwarf type creatures. And I think they're meant to be kind of small dwarf-like creatures. But I decided to make them nice and tall and give them long legs. Alright, pumpkin. Pumpkin we're going to start with, when it comes to doing the pumpkins, we're going to start with a small oval shape. Kind of an almond, not really an oval. Okay. And then what we have to do is we have to, like, this is our middle of our pumpkin. I'm going to switch paintbrushes so you can see this a little clearer. Better line brush here, just so you can see where my lines are going. Alright, so then I'm going to take this and I'm going to come up and do a segment next to it and join it to the bottom one down here. Alright, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to do a segment and bring it to the bottom. Now your segments can be close together like that, or you can have it further apart. You can have a bigger segment, that's okay. They don't have to be symmetrical. I've never seen a perfect pumpkin. I've seen some pretty cool pumpkins. I've never seen a perfect pumpkin. Alright. Back here you would have like another one that kind of is hidden. You'd have maybe part of this. You're not going to see all of it from the behind, so we're just going to show a little bit from the side. We want to just kind of fill it in. So that's kind of what we're doing for our pumpkin. If you think of segments like that. And then the stem comes up. Right? It comes off of all of these segments. The stem comes out of this, and then it goes. And you can make it all twirly whirly if you want. I made mine on this last one kind of gnarly. So it was kind of like still part of the vine attached. And just kind of get really gnarly with it. And I came down and I had a leaf attached to the last one, but that's because I had space on this side that I wanted to fill. This one I'm right off to the edge of my paper. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to my original size brush here. Put it in my water. I always put my paintbrushes in my water when I'm not using them so they don't dry out. I don't like paint drying in my paintbrushes, and I only try to put a little bit of water in here so that it doesn't like run up the brush too much. So I'm just going to fill in my segments just so we can have it filled in. I just want to show you the paint strokes and how we're going to do that when we make a pumpkin. When we fill it in with color, how it's going to look. Now, if you want your pumpkin to be tall and skinny, you can make a tall and skinny pumpkin. You want 2 pumpkins, make a second pumpkin. You want a big and a small, or a medium and a small, or whatever, make whatever you want. It is your painting. I'm showing you how to make it. Now you can make another one. It's the same thing. If you want it tall and skinny, we'll make it tall and skinny. I can put one behind this guy, I guess. So he's going to be back here hiding. Right? He's going to be behind this guy. Now I have a tall, skinny pumpkin hiding behind my gnome. If you want to put it in, put it in. If you don't want to put it in, don't put it in. If you have a lot of space over here because you didn't put your nose in the same spot that I did or whatever of your gnome and you moved everything over, then put it where it feels right. Maybe he's in the center of the painting and you have some pumpkins on both sides. Maybe there's a pumpkin back here too. I don't know. It's your painting. You can be off the canvas a little bit if you want. So you don't have a full pumpkin there. Maybe you got one kind of off the canvas over here. And you can go ahead and make as many beautiful pumpkins as you plan on having in your picture. You want to put more gnomes in your picture. Put more gnomes in your picture. You want mushrooms in your picture. Put mushrooms in your picture. Alright? So I'm going to take my fan again on my hair dryer, or I'm going to leave and come back to this. But I'm going to let it dry again so that I don't get that white paint in my other colors. I don't mind it in the yellows and the oranges, but in the red it turns pink. I don't want pink, I want red. So I want to make sure that this is dry before I start painting the red, or it's going to end up looking very Barbie instead of gnome. Alright. Now because I started with this first, it's dry, as you can see. That was other paint that was on my hand. See, nothing there. And that's all dry up there. Well, something wasn't, but it's close enough. Alright, so then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my palette here, and I'm going to add some red to it. Just see the paint dries and gets stuck around your bottles, and that's perfectly normal. Put some red down if I can get it out. It's almost empty. Leave that upside down so I can get more out if I need it. So I have my red. I still have the brown on my canvas as well, and my palette. Don't mean to mispronounce things here. So I still have all these colors easily accessible to me if I want them. I'm also going to need yellow and orange. I want to mix up some of his nose color. I want his boots and his gloves to be brown. I have a little lip in his mustache, and I want his mustache to be just a darker gray than his beard, or a brown, or you can make him a blonde gnome if you want. You make him whatever color you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my paintbrush corner into the gray, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to scoop up a bunch of white, and I'm going to start painting that light gray kind of up around his nose and under his hat, because I need those areas to be covered with this color. And I want some more of that gray to come through, so I'm going to dip into the gray again, and I'm just going to start doing some swoops. And his beard is going to be in here, and I'm going to make his beard bigger. We're just going to start with this. So when I say swoops, it's kind of like a parenthesis again, you know, or you can just do little turns with your paintbrush like this. Just kind of turn it, and it'll kind of give him some curly hair, like Santa Claus's curly beard, right? And then the more you brush back and forth, the more it's going to blend together and become one solid color. If you just kind of swoosh and leave it, you're going to see all those different colors. Point to his beard down there. I'm going to bring his beard out this way a bit. Alright. Therefore, it's painted up here underneath his nose and under the brim of his hat where I want it to be. I'm going to paint the nose over top of it. I'm going to paint his mustache over top of that. I wanted to see where that was going to be. That's why I painted it in. Before I normally would paint that, I would paint his belly and his arms. So that's generally where I want his beard. I'll probably go over it again, but I wanted to show you where I was putting his beard. A lot of people can't see it once you cover up those initial lines, so I want to make sure that I'm here to help you see where it's going to go again. Alright, I need some orange for his shirt. I'm going to put this next to the white because I have room there. And some yellow. I always give my paints a good shake before I open them because it sets and separates sometimes. I'll plop that one over there. I'm going to take a little bit smaller brush because it's smaller areas, so I'm going to try to go around his beard, but I'll probably end up going over it again. I did give him a striped shirt on his arms. His belly was just orange, but then I gave him striped pants as well. They were yellow and orange, if you don't remember the reference image. But I want to just paint on that base color first, and for his shirt, I'm going to say the base color was orange. So I'm going to go around his beard. On one side. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to do this side first. And if I go into his gloves, that's fine, because his gloves are going to be brown, so that'll get covered up by the orange. If I need to go a little bit into the blue over here to round them off, make them fatter, whatever I want to do, I can do that. It's okay. It'll be a little bit darker because you'll see the blue through it, but I'll show you how to fix that later. So I'm going to come over here, round off his belly. There's his belly hanging over his pants. I go around his beard. I try to brush a lot of those extra strokes away so you don't see the lines that were left over, because I fill my paintbrush up with a lot of paint. So it tends to leave lines. And then you just go ahead and again go right around his arm there, his beard, and whatever. So there he is. There's the body. Alright. I'm going to actually have his hat come down over top of this a little bit, so it'll kind of cover up some more of that. You might notice that some of your paints, depending on the paints you buy and the quality, these are Apple Barn. These are very inexpensive, not a very high quality, but it's a decent paint, especially for beginners. You can find a lot of colors. You can get little 2-ounce bottles, or you can get the 8-ounce bottles. You can find them in Walmart or any craft store that sells them. You can go up another level and get the basics. As far as paint goes, it's a little bit thicker, a little denser paint, rather than this is very on the runny side. Or you can go even higher quality. So you can get like this, you can get, which is kind of craft, paint. You can get a student grade paint, which would be like the basics that you would find at a Walmart or a Michael's or whatever craft store. I'm going to paint his bottoms yellow. So right next to it, and if I drag some of that color in, I'm okay with it. Because it's still wet, I might end up dragging some of that orange down. And I might change my, see the little streak there, orange color, and I'm okay with that. Just filling in the base color there. Again, I don't care if it goes down by where his boot is, because that's going to be brown and it's going to cover up that yellow. I'd rather have paint overlapping than not enough paint and see white canvas through it. Alright? Now, pumpkins, you can paint orange or yellow or blue or green or whatever color you want. I'm going to add some yellow to it first. I'm also going to switch to a bigger paintbrush because that's taking me forever. Let me find it. Here it is. Dry it off real quick for you. Alright, bigger paintbrush means I can paint the area quicker. Alright, now again, I know that I'm painting on my tape over here, but I'd rather make sure that it hits all parts of the canvas than miss something. And pumpkins come in a lot of different colors nowadays, so you don't have to worry about having the perfect orange or the perfect whatever color you have. Stretch that up in there a little bit. Now this one goes behind his glove. Remember, because we added it after we already painted our gnome. So I'm going to add him in there. I'm going to switch to orange so I can see the differences between my pumpkins. And so that you can see the differences between my pumpkins. And we'll add more color to it later. Right now it's just a base color. We're not too worried about what it looks like because this is just the beginning. It's just the starting. We are just getting basic stuff down so we have good coverage of paint on our entire piece. Again, if you're doing a canvas, this is my edge. You want to turn your canvas and get your edge with this pumpkin color so it looks like it completely wraps around the canvas. Stretched canvases go around a wooden frame, so if you do the edges so it looks like the canvas was just stretched, the painting was stretched over the frame, it looks a lot more finished. If you don't do that, don't leave it white. Don't leave it canvas color. Color it any other color, but don't leave it canvas color. Or frame it professionally. A lot of people will use black. If you have a place in your house you're going to hang it, let's say your walls are tan, some sort of beige, whatever, you can try coloring it the beige so it kind of blends right into the wall that you have it hanging on. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and put down the color for the gloves. Again, just that base color. Just so I have it all colored in and I can start to see what it's going to look like on my finished piece. This boot is also that color, so I can go ahead and put that down here. That way I can get that paint out of my paintbrush a little bit better. This is a bigger area for this bigger brush. The glove's a little on the small side. The other part, when you're working with things like these Apple Barn paints, you might notice you're going to have to put down, I think I started saying this, more than one coat because they just don't cover very well. Some of them are really, really runny and they just don't cover. They're kind of translucent. You can see that there's color there. They're not clear and transparent. You can't see through them, but you can still kind of see through them, so they're translucent. Opaque would mean you can't see in between them at all, and then translucent means you can see some of the color underneath it, and transparent means you can see through it. Alright, so I'm going to switch to my smaller brush just because it's easier. That's not the one I wanted though. This smaller one is the one I want. It's still a square flat brush. And now I can get a little bit closer to those white lines. I don't want to leave any white paint showing either. So I want those covered up as well. And right now if I need to change up the size of the glove or make it a little taller, you know, so it has a cuff like that, you can do that now. Put this down. Take a look again, make sure I didn't paint one too big and leave one a little smaller. So I'm going to just double check my size. Make sure they look kind of similar in size. Shape, I'm not too concerned about if the one shape is a little bit different than the other. I really want to focus to make sure the size is about the same. Looks pretty good. Until this paint dries, you can't put more paint down or it's going to pick up and keep coming off. So keep that in mind. You can only put down so much paint and then it'll start lifting off again. I'm going to take whatever left in my brown here and just kind of start putting it in my stem. Right off the page. So it's kind of a dry brush technique where you have very little paint left on there and you just kind of squishy it in. Alright. I want my mustache to go next, but just so you can see where the nose is going, I'll mix up a little bit of that tan color. I'm going to lighten it up later, but remember, here's the nose. If you want to put it in there now, you can. You just have to paint around with the mustache and be careful. You'll probably add another color with that, another layer for the nose then if you put it in there now. Alright, I'm going to go with a gray beard again, his mustache. I'm going to bring his mustache, I'm going to make it longer this time. I'm going to give him a big old whoosh type mustache. I'm going to make this whole thing right here his mustache. This whole side. I'm going to call that his mustachio. Alright, so I want to try to mimic the same thing on the other side, so I'm going to try to come down a little bit and bring that over here. And then bring that back up. It's not perfect. I don't care. You shouldn't either. Because I've never seen a real life gnome. It's all made up in our head. So there's our two mustache pieces that again we can fill in later. And I can use some of that skin color that I had made up, which of course is already dry on my palette there, so I'm going to grab some, and I'm going to do a lip right in there. So his lip, the bottom lip is showing. Alright. Alright, so his hat now. His hat is red. So if you're sticking with the same color scheme that I have, let's give him a red hat. Rinse off my brush. Dry it off. It's a 1/4 inch brush. It's flat. I'm going to start painting that hat. Again, I want to come down here with it. And bring that up over his nose. See, I went over his beard a little bit. But that's okay, because I can go either back over his beard again, his mustache and put the gray back in there, or I can say the hat fell over his mustache. No matter which way you do it, it's fine. Bring that hat up here again. Kind of wiggly and wonky a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy with the wiggle wonks, but that's a new term, wiggle wonks. I do want to have it all up in there and colored. Covering all that white. If you go over the blue slightly with it, you're going to see the red is another translucent paint. So you probably see some of that blue through. And that's just going to kind of look like an edge shadow, which is okay. And then we're going to color this in. That might be a pumpkin later. I might leave it as a red ball. I haven't decided. I have it a pumpkin on my other piece painting, but I can change it up. Okay. Rinsing that out. I'm deciding, do I like it? Is it okay? Does it look fine? Do I want to tweak anything? Now's the time to do the tweaking. If I think my legs are too fat or too skinny or his belly is too round or not round enough, now's the time where you want to tweak some of those things. Now this guy is much beefier on his legs than my original guy. My original guy here, as you can see, was kind of skinny legs. Kind of like that belly was really overshadowing his little toothpick legs. But this time around when I painted him, I gave him thicker legs. So no matter which way you have it, whatever you like, that's what you want to paint with. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to go back to the background colors. Whatever's behind the thing. I want to do the thing that's the furthest in the background. And what's the furthest in the background to me right now is this pumpkin. So I want to paint that pumpkin before I start painting anything over this gnome or even this pumpkin. I want that pumpkin there because he's behind everything to be painted next. Alright, I'm going to move my paints over here so I'm not crossing over. So I'm going to dip into my orange paint. And I'm going to start painting those large kind of parentheses in there, okay? Now remember, this is over the yellow, and the yellow's already dry. But that yellow in there is great for the highlight color, all right? And a little bit of red. I'm going to switch to my tiny little brush again here, and I'll show you with my detail brush. If I take my small little detail brush and I dip it in the red and I kind of draw those lines in where those segments are, dip again because I ran out of paint, okay, and I draw those segments in with the red while everything is still wet, and I think I'm going to grab another brush here just because it's easier to show you with all these different brushes. It's cleaned out. Yeah, maybe it could have some gray in it. I'll try cleaning it a little bit better here. Okay, and I'm going to dip this one in the yellow, alright? So I want this yellow line in the middle here to be nice and wet still. Alright, so that's wet. Throw that in my paintbrush, or my water cup. I got yellow on here. I'm going to go over next to that red line, and then I'm going to go over the red line. Same over here. I'm going to go over that red line, and then I'm going to bring it into that yellow area. Okay, it's going to make that a little brighter still. I'm going to dip back into my orange and paint this section up here. Again, I'm going to go over his foot because it's in my way. Over here, I'm going to go over this pumpkin because it's in my way. Alright, so now you can still see those darker lines here where those segments were. If you want more segments, go ahead with your liner brush and add, while it's still wet, add another couple segments in there. I'm going to skip where the pumpkin goes. And you can add another section in there. If this got a little too disappeared on you, you can fix that. Take my yellow brush, sorry, orange. Words are hard sometimes. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush out real quick. Doesn't have to be super clean. Dry it off. Dip into the yellow. And put some of those highlights back in Right, some of those bright orange, because it is orange, but I'm using yellow, and because it's wet, it's turning those different colors. So it looks like the different segments of your pumpkin. Okay, you'd honestly probably have another line here. There probably wouldn't be one so spread apart since it's a tall, skinny one. It's your pumpkin, you do what you want with it. All right, so now this pumpkin here is in front of it, so I gotta draw that back in. He's over here, he's in front of it. So I'm going to be blending that in. I'm going to make him a lighter orange, so I'm going to add a little bit of white to my paintbrush with that orange. I want to make him a lighter, so he definitely stands out from that one back there. Now if you want to just kind of keep doing that in segments and going back between the orange and the yellow on your brush and just kind of put segments down like that, and then just flip your paintbrush and start painting in that direction. It'll kind of give you the pumpkin look without having to do too much work. It's got the segments in it from my point of view when I'm looking at it close. If I was to stand back and look at it, I would completely not see the segments anymore. So you're not going to be sitting on top of your painting when it's hanging on your wall. You might want to add a little bit more definition. So I'm going to come back in there and I'm going to add some of these kind of red lines so I can segment out my pumpkin. Now wherever the pink, or sorry, wherever the red and the white meet, they're going to make a pink, so just be aware of that. If you use white, it will turn your pumpkin pink. Alright, so I've got my orange on my pumpkin, my paintbrush. Go right next to it, and then smooth it in. If I jump right over top of it with too much of the orange on my paintbrush, you're going to lose those segments. I come in with some white, brush it in around so it kind of becomes orange, then smush it into my pumpkin, and I'll get that segment to stand out. Otherwise it'll just turn a red mess on your, or dark orange mess. Alright, last guy over here, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of add some extra yellow and orange to him, maybe a little white. Maybe I'll touch up a little segment over there. Touch a little bit of red. Alright. That one we're going to say is further back. We don't need to see so much detail. It's just a giant pumpkin back there. Alright, so now we have that one done because it's the furthest behind. I did this one because I was doing pumpkins, and this because I was doing pumpkins. But what's the next furthest thing behind? Well, the next thing that's back would be his pants and then his shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and do his pants next. I'm going to take my smaller paintbrush because it's smaller details. Not the fine one, but the one that's, you know, a little bit smaller. It's probably 1/8 of an inch, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and give him some stripes again. I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm just going to start going in the direction of the stripes. And I know you can't really see these stripes right now because it's the same color. So I'm going to dip into my orange and I'm going to go above and I'm going to put some stripes in there. Now if you want it to make it look like they're curved around his body, like he doesn't have flat legs, if you give him a slight curve like this, it tends to make it look more like he's got form and he's not just flat painting. Alright, so I'll show you again here. I'm going to skip the yellow stripe I'm going to do a little bit of a soft curve, nothing fancy, nothing major or drastic. And then continue that way. So I go about 2 paintbrush strokes with my little brush here. 1, 2, maybe 2.5. Alright, if I get one a little too thick, I'll rinse my brush off, I'll dry it, I'll come back here with the yellow, and I go ahead and put the stripe back. Or if I didn't get my curve quite right, I can come back with the pink. If I made something a little too fat or too thick, the stripes are too wide, I can just go ahead and correct that with the other color. I'm going to go ahead back to my orange and finish up the stripe here. And I like that it finishes with the yellow next to his belly so that you can see where his pants start and stop. Alright. If I want to add a little more detail, a little more emphasis that he's round, so you're adding a little bit of shading. So I get my tiny little brush here. I'm going to take either a little bit of red and mix it in. So I just dip my paintbrush a little bit into the red. I'm going to mix it into the orange here. I don't want it to be red red. I want it just to be a darker orange. Because then I can use this for the shadow on my orange stripes, but also on my yellow stripes. So I'm just going to kind of give him a shadow here and here. And if you're not doing this quickly, you probably just want to do a couple at a time. And then I'm going to dip into just the straight orange. I'm going to blend that darker color in from both directions. I have to turn my canvas here so I can get a good angle at it with my hand and my paintbrush. So that way it looks a little bit darker here on the edges. Okay, and then over here, that darker orange. And start bringing it this way. Bring it that way. And then just the plain orange here on my brush. And just go back and forth, light pressure towards where I put that darker color down. So lighten up your pressure as you're pushing close to that. But then you're still getting that color through. And if some of the yellow comes through, it just looks like a highlight. So don't stress if you're painting a little too fast and your paint hasn't dried yet. It'll just look like a stripe. Oop, that is bright red. I didn't change that color. I went to the wrong pile on my plate. So I'm going to take my orange, give it a little bit more of a shadow there than I wanted, but that's okay. Grab some of that red and bring it on over. Up here too. I'm gonna take my, it's red still on my thing, so I'm just gonna use it and put it here on this side. Bring that in. And blend it in with my orange. And give it a slight shadow. If you want to leave it a little bit stronger, you can leave it, straight red. You don't have to go orange, dark orange, whatever. And then it's a little bit more noticeable. I like my things a lot more subtle, but when I put it and I step away, I don't see it as well. So if you want to be able to see it better, and you don't want it so subtle, then you're going to want to just leave the red and not have so much orange. Now I'm doing a lighter orange, or light, well, it's a yellowish orange on the edge here as well. And then I'm going to dip into my yellow and blend that over. Now that was a little too close, a little too much. If I press down, I can get some of that, there we go, that orange to come across. I kind of want this all a little bit darker under here because this is under his belly, so that's going to be shadow anyway. A little bit of that orange here on this side. Dip in the yellow again. I never clean my brush out, that's why it's orange. Rinse that out real quick. There we go. And the yellow next to it, and then start pulling it in. This is dried out on me already, so I'm going to touch those up again, bring that this way a little bit. That's creating your subtle shadows. Alright, there's his pants. If you decide you want to put another coat over the stripes, because it's too much yellow showing through, you can put another coat on them. I'm just going to leave them like that for now. I might put it on later. I also might make them a little dirtier. I did that with my one there at the end, and I added some just colors, make them look like he'd been working a little bit harder in the fields. So I have my two small brushes here cleaned out. I grab my next, my 1/4 inch flat brush here. Get those handy for me. Alright. Now the next thing that's the farthest thing back would be his arms and his shoulders and his belly. So I'm going to dip into that orange paint, and I'm just going to give it another coat real quick. Because it's one of those colors that's pretty light. So I'm just going to coat it again with the orange. And again, I know my beard is in front of it, so I can cover up any mistakes with the beard later. I just put the beard in there so you guys could see where it's at. Alright, now I want to add some red in for those highlights again, or those shadows rather. So I'm actually going to outline my beard here. And if you wanted it to be a dark shadow under your beard, you could leave it like that. I'm going to run my brush right along the side of it again. So I'm making it a little bit thicker, but it's also blending it into that orange. And then just in my orange paint, right up next to it, I'm going to blend that out just a smidge so it's not quite so bright with red. And I can kind of add a little over here where his belly is on the side. I'm kind of out of red. Here we go. Add a little over here, and I can add a little over here on this side. So his arm's gonna be. So his arm's gonna be, and I can blend that in as well. Very light pressure, dragging it in the orange. It's still wet. Light pressure. Nice swoop. And there we have it. Now I want to give his belly, his underbelly, a little bit darker down here from where his pants and his shirt went up. There we go. Okay. So the next job is switching to the smaller paintbrush because I have to do the stripes on his arms, and his stripes are red and orange. So I'm just going to do a swoop, a swoop, a swoop. I don't care if it's not getting exactly to the end right now. If I'm not getting the full coverage from the one spot to the other, I'm just trying to get that spacing in there. I'll go back in with my smaller brush because this is a small area, and then I'll go back and make sure that I get all the way from one side of my arm to the other. without getting a chunk of paint in, which I do right here, a chunk. You need to adjust the thickness of them, make it a little thicker if you made a mistake. You want thicker stripes, maybe you don't want stripes at all. It's your choice because it's your gnome. Just know that the stripes start to go this way a bit with his arm, his shoulders where they're bending. I'm going to turn my canvas again just so I don't get my hand in the wet paint. I try to lift it up off the canvas sometimes, so sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm swooping it around a little bit here, just to make it look like it's going around his arm. He's got a round arm, not a flat arm. So I give him a swoop just like I did on the pants, just a slight swoop. Slight curve. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and take my orange right next to it. It's all still wet. So I might be able to blend some of this together as I'm doing it. We shall see. Just trying to give that shadowy effect here on the sides as well. Probably a nice shadow underneath his belly. This is pretty wet right now. It did not dry off as well as I wanted it to. If I had a paper towel next to me, it would dry it up a little bit. Alright, I'm going to turn it this way. So again, my arm is not in the paint. I'm going to take that red and just kind of drag it through. I had orange on my paintbrush, but this red here was still wet. Just small little strokes, stretching it that way. And then again this way. I'm going to rinse out my brush. I'm going to move my plate so I can get it good and dry. I'm going to go in with just my orange and painting the orange stripe again. So I don't want it to blend completely away. I still want to see my stripes, but I do want to see that there's kind of some sort of shadow there to create the form, the detail around your painting, what you want to start doing when you're next level. Now this is not by any means top quality lessons or level painting skills lessons that I'm giving you, but it is going to help you take your paintings, if you're a beginner, to the next level. Alright, so I have my orange and red stripes on the shirt. I'm leaving his belly as is. I got that shadow down around his beard by putting white or red in there. I'm going to take my liner brush. No, I'm just going to clean it out and set it aside. Let's see my other brushes over here. The round one that I never use, but I used that one time to show you. If that's what you have and that's what you like, that's what you should use. Alright, the next part, I'm going to work on his hat. I want his nose to come in front of his hat a little bit. I want his mustache to come in front of his hat a little bit. So in my point of view, the hat, the gloves, the boots, that's kind of my next step. So I'm going to come over here to my palette. I'm going to dip my 1/4 inch flat brush into my red paint and just start adding another coat to his hat. Get it good and covered. I also like to have it wet, because why? I like to paint wet on wet. It blends so nicely when it's like that on the canvas. Alright, now I'm going to take a little bit of that brown that's right next to my red on my palette, in case you don't remember. My brown was right next to my red on the palette. Just dip a little corner in there. And I'm going to take that corner and I'm going to define the top line of the brim of his hat. And that's going to be my shadow color. Blending that in on the edges there. Leave a little bit of it brown there, lining it up so it shows that nice dark detail. I'm going to dip just the corner in again and come up here and add a little bit to the side. Give it a little bit more definition like that. Kind of some wrinkles in there. One more little corner dip there into the paint. Do a nice line here. Edge. And bring some of that color this way. Alright. I can add a little bit of dirt to his brim if I want by adding a little bit of that brown. Kind of in here. We've been out harvesting and getting dirty today, so he doesn't have his Sunday best on. Just to darken it up and dirty it up just a smidge. Since I got that on my paintbrush, I'm going to go ahead and paint in his gloves another coat, because remember the paint quality isn't the greatest on some of the colors. They're pretty translucent. Add in another color there. Another layer of color, I should say. This has got some red in it still. I didn't wash my brush, so you might notice a little red. Don't panic. You can either wash it out, or you can do the same thing I did and just let it be. Boot down here. And give it another coat. Alright, so his gloves are painted again, his hat is good and done, his pumpkins are okay out here. We still have to work on his stem. I could put some fun little details in the background if I wanted to. I got a little orange in his beard there, so I'm going to have to cover that up. I got a little bit over here, so I'm going to have to cover that up. So I'm going to go in with my, not that brush. Let's see where it's at. My smaller brush, it's about 1/8 of an inch. As you can see, it's about half of the size of the 1/4 inch. There's the 1/4, there's the 1/8. When I line it up, it covers about half of it. Alright, so I'm going to take the 1/8 of an inch brush here, flat brush. It has a number. I just don't see the number anymore. I think it's a 2. I don't know. Half the time they get covered with paint or they fall off because I have my students using them and they put too much water in their cups. Okay. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to go ahead to that gray and do his beard color again. His mustache, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and put his mustache back in there. Remember I said I wanted his mustache to come out above his hat. So I'm going to take it back over that edge of his hat again. If you want it under his hat, you can leave it under. I'm saying this guy's got a big old bushy one. He's got a big bushy stash. Alright, I'm going to get over here and coming up over his stash. A little bit over his nose too. Just so I can get that nice line that I want. Alright, so there's his mustachio. And if I was to dip into the white, I can get kind of that beard color going again, right? I can just kind of give it some swoops. Give a little curly hair motion going on there. Back into my white. And swoop it around. Give him a gray beard, but also kind of a, white going on in there too. He's not quite Santa Claus's age, but he's getting there. Just some small little circles and strokes. You can literally just make a couple circles like this if you want with your paintbrush. Alright, now it's covered up the stuff behind him, so he's been fixed that way. I'm gonna rinse my brush out because I want to go ahead and do his nose now. So I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna grab some of this white. If I grab some orange at this point, it doesn't matter, because the skin peachy color that I'm gonna make might have some orange in it. There could be some red if you wanted to. You decide how dark you want your gnome to be. If you want him to be paper white, you could make his nose white. If you want kind of a peachy gnome, you can add a little red or pink to it. Right, that got a little crazy there with my going up over his hat. I got a little carried away and over his mustache, but it's alright. I'm going to dip a little bit into the brown and wipe some of it off. I want to try to get a little bit of a shadow going on. A little bit more brown. Alright. I need my little detail brush to get his lip again. Still need some of that same color as his nose, or you could add a little pink to it if you wanted to make him look like he's got kind of pinkish lips. Come in with a little bit of white here and lighten that up a little bit there. Give him like a little, maybe he's got some freckles, I don't know. A little line on his nose. I don't like that. I'm gonna blend that out. If I give him a freckle, it should be brown, right? Might look more like a wart though than a freckle. Putzing around there. We want to add some definition to his boots. I'm going to add just a smidgen of black to my paper here, my plate. Take off my gob there. Just the smallest little dot. Now this would be about your student quality. It's a lot thicker than the craft quality paint. It's actually by Handy Art, made in Milton, Wisconsin, and it's a lot nicer quality. They do make some of the other name brands as well under their brand name, but it's the same paint. So I'm going to dip just the tip there into the black, and I'm going to bring it over here to the brown, and I'm going to start blending that together until I get a nice deep brown. And I'm going to come over here to his boot. If you want to make this a light brown and make it look like it's fur, you can do that. I'm just going to say he's got a nice dark stripe here. This is that top cuff of the boot. And over here too. Back in and grab some more of that paint color. Alright, so just like I did here with the striping and whatever, I want to also do that down here around his boot bottom, his heel. I'm going to grab a little bit more, mix a bigger amount up. I want to give his soles a little darkness down here. But then I want to go into just the brown color again. Paint right next to it. Get a lot of that paint out first. Get it out of your brush. And then you can do a swoop over that darker to blend it in so it's not such a strong line. And line it up the back of his boot over here. Now remember, I had some red in my boot color when I put the last one on, so that's why it's got this darker thing going on. So right up next to that line with that lighter brown color, and then blend over it and blend it up and out. Line through here again. A little bit darker paint right here, because this would be darker underneath there. And we're going to paint the rest of his boot. I'm going to switch paintbrushes. I don't like with that small one. It's fine for details, but I don't like painting that slowly. I like to fill my brush and get it going. There we go. Now they look like there's some light and definition to his boots. This one looks a little bigger, but maybe he's got 1 foot different size than the other. I'm going to go ahead with my brown over my gloves for the one last time. Just kind of make those evened out too. And again, with a darker color, my little tiny brush, that little darker brown, I can add some definition under this cuff here and under this part of the cuff over here. If I want to bring it down some, I can do it above it too if I want. Like if, you know, just coming around them. You can say, hey, he's been working in the garden, so this is really dirty. That's fine. Whatever. You do you. Okay. Tiny little brush. Turn on my canvas so I don't get my hand in the wet boots. I've got my brown and my green. I'm going to mix those two together. More brown than green. Hopefully. Mix it in with that dirty boot color too. So a little bit of black goes in there. Or you could grab a little bit of gray. And you're going to start adding some paint color to that stem. We want to make sure all the white is gone. So go ahead, light pressure, and just outline that pumpkin stem again. And then if you push down harder pressure in the larger areas, it'll take all that paint out of your brush for you. So light pressure to do the fine lines, and then push down a little harder to get the paint out of your brush. And I'm just going to have them come down the stems, down those segments a little bit. I'm not going to go on everyone. Look at one going this way. Another one kind of coming down over here. That's how the segment will go. And if you want to add a little bit of the green back in there, make it look like it's still somewhat alive, and kind of bounce a little light color through there. Or maybe you want to put a leaf in there, you can. If you want a little bit of a highlight, you can add a little bit of that nose color, so that light tan, or mix up a little bit of white again with your brown. And you can add that kind of like to the top. And get that in there. It looks like a little highlight then. And now, let's see. Now I have some fun with it. I think I'm going to leave that one red for this time around. If you want to turn it into a pumpkin, you can. You just have to paint it orange and add yellows. Alright. So I want to make this area under here more like a shadow. So I'm going to grab a different brush because that one's too tiny. And I'm going to use this one here. So it's my 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use this color down here that I used, but a little bit more green this time, I think. We'll see how it looks. I'm going to put a shadow underneath the pumpkin, clean up any of the pumpkin garbage there that I had. Just let it go off my page. Right up in here is going to be darker, obviously, because the two pumpkins are together, so that's going to cast a shadow. If there was light above us. So as you get better with your art, you need to start thinking about where the shadows fall on your pieces. Give that a flat bottom. We'll go around the base of his foot. I don't know if my tape is there or not. I can see my tape. It's just barely under his boot. Alright. We'll have this kind of go out this way a little bit and stop. Say his shadow kind of comes out that way. And then we'll put one underneath this pumpkin here too. So that's my shadows. Then I had some fun with my liner brush. I went into some greens and I just gave myself some little twigs of grass. It's a little bit taller than others. You could go crazy with this. You can keep it kind of sparse. It's up to you. You can even put some down here by the shadowy area. Somewhere. Got some grass coming, and people are like, "Whether pumpkins aren't growing in the grass." These pumpkins, they went out of the garden because he had so many pumpkins. So you know, they're everywhere. If you want a dirt background, so your pumpkins are in a field, then you could have made a dirt background. I made a grassy background, and it's my painting, so I get to do what I want. Just like it's your painting, so you can do what you want. I think I'm on tape over here. I'm like, I want to add more grass there. I'm like, it's tape, Jennifer, it's tape. Okay. Alright, so there we have it. There's our pumpkins and our gnome. And I want to add a little bit more highlight. This is when I like to have fun with it. Alright, I'm going to clean the green out of my brush real quick. I like to use my bright colors by themselves, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of put a few little marks of where I think those colors are going to show up and stand out in this piece. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a little bit everywhere. Any color that I used, I'm just going to barely touch my canvas and drag some of that color. This part is totally optional, totally up to you if you want to do it or not. Add a little bit right through his belly here, because you know, why not? Some down here on his legs, make them a little bit brighter in those stripe areas. Then again, I might make it a little dirtier here in a second. We'll see. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and add a little swoosh. I don't really want to put any in his beard. I don't want the yellow in his beard or his mustachio. I might put a little on his gloves. Might put a little on his boot. Yeah, why not? Alright, I'm going to rinse my brush out again. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the orange. And I'm just going to kind of place a couple fun little lines wherever I feel like. Again with the orange, come back through here a little bit maybe. Maybe one over here. Just brighten up that pumpkin slightly. Maybe it got a little too muted. Alright, add some more of the orange in his stripes. Just make it pop a little bit more. I don't think I want the orange in his hat or anything. I am going to do some white. I'll do white right over top of his boot like that. Nice bright. A little bit too much water in my brush. Nice bright white color there. A little bit there and there. Nice little stripe up here, let it kind of bounce. And a little bit into my pumpkins. And then I'm going to take the brown, We'll add a little bit at his knees because, you know, he was digging all day in the pumpkin patch. Add a little bit of the dark here to the pumpkins as well because, you know, they're dirty. They've been growing in the field. And give him a little bit of dirt on his nose up here. Cover up some of that a little bit, maybe a little too much. Add a little dirt in his hat. Maybe a little on his elbows. Give his hat a little more dirt. Alright. The other colors I use blue and I use green, right? I don't want to use any more green down here because I've got so much, but I am going to dip into the blue. And I'm going to throw a couple little blue dashes here and there. Why? Because I can. And I like it. Again, you don't have to like what I like. You can make it however you want. Just don't really think about it. Just kind of randomly place them places and see what happens. Just right there. Put one over there. I think I want a little red in his mustachio. So I might put a little blue there too. It might look purple in a second. We'll see. Let's say he went to the salon and they put in some fun little highlights. Alright. I think I'm happy. I think I'm done. Ooh, that's purple. Some of that bright red in a couple areas there. Okay, there he is. If you wanted to add some clouds or something in the background, you could add some clouds back there. If you wanted to add something else back there, a building or whatever, you could do that. Now because I taped mine down, mine is going to have a nice clean edge when I lift this up. If I painted too much or if I left the tape on for too long and it starts to stick, do not tear your paper. Add a heat gun or a hairdryer to it. It will loosen up and soften up your edges so that it doesn't, the adhesive rather, sorry, so that it does not tear your paper when you're taking it off. I love the way that paintings on paper look when you have a nice white border. Plus this will fit nicely into a frame if I wanted to frame it. This is just going to go up in my studio here as yet another painting that we can offer. So I hope you enjoyed this. Go ahead and sign it when it's dry. I like to use a Sharpie marker. I don't know if I have them here. Yes, I do. So it might be kind of smushed, but I'll go ahead and sign my painting here. That's our finished piece. So I'll show you here our finished piece and our one that we were looking off of, my journal that I was working on. And then here he is. We'll do the side by side. You can see not every painting has to look exactly the same. Have some fun with it. Do some crazy things. Add some animals in the background. I don't know. You figure it out. You do you, guys. Have a good day.